My name is Mara Bennett. I was 32 years old when I stood in a bridal suite wearing a white silk robe and stared at the bruise spreading around my left eye. Downstairs, 136 guests were taking their seats. A violinist was warming up beside the flower-covered arch. My fiancé was fastening the cufflinks I had given him for Christmas. And my mother, the woman who had struck me less than 12 hours earlier, was welcoming everyone with the serene smile of a saint in a stained glass window. On the dressing table lay a pale green tube of color corrector. Beside it sat a thick blue envelope containing 21 years of evidence. The makeup artist promised she could hide the bruise before the photographer arrived. She had no idea that my mother had taught me the same trick when I was 16. Green first, then concealer, then powder. By the time I learned what that lesson really meant, an entire wedding had been built around my silence. What happened when my fiancé finally saw my face lasted less than a minute. What I did afterward ended the wedding, exposed the truth about my family, and cost me nearly everything I owned. But to understand why I walked downstairs without covering a single mark, you need to understand the house where I grew up. It stood on Alder Street in Bellwether, Pennsylvania, and people were always complimenting how beautiful it was. My mother, Evelyn Bennett, kept every window spotless and every room ready for inspection. Inside, everything depended on her mood. My father used to call her particular. The women at St. Matthew's called her devoted. She led charity drives, delivered casseroles to grieving families, and remembered every child's birthday. No one saw how the air changed when she was displeased. No one heard the cupboard doors close a little harder or watched my father lower his voice when her jaw tightened. When I was 8, Dad found me crying in the garage after she smashed my favorite mug because I had left it beside the sink. He knelt in front of me, smelling of motor oil and wintergreen, and gave me the rule that governed our family. "Your mother carries a lot," he whispered. "Don't make it heavier." From then on, I treated her emotions like a dangerous patient. I learned the warning signs: tight mouth, slow breathing, sudden quiet. I removed possible excuses, apologized for arguments I had not started, and redirected any conversation that threatened to anger her. By 14, I could enter a room and measure its danger without anyone saying a word. Years later, that training made me an excellent emergency room nurse. I could calm frightened relatives, recognize violence inside a practiced explanation, and keep my hands steady while everyone else panicked. Only one person ever seemed to understand that: my mother's younger sister, Lydia. Aunt Lydia lived 2 hours away in Harrisburg, laughed loudly, and asked direct questions. Once, after finding me washing an already clean plate, she asked, "What happens if you stop trying to keep everyone happy?" I did not know how to answer. Soon afterward, Lydia disappeared from holidays. The official explanation was that she was bitter, dramatic, and jealous of my mother. No one told me what she had done. Her name became something adults exchanged over lowered voices. By the time I was 15, I had learned not to ask. The first injury I could no longer explain to myself happened the following year. My mother had invited the pastor and his wife for dinner. During dessert, she told a story about a summer trip, and I corrected one harmless detail. Everyone laughed. She laughed too, pouring coffee as if nothing had happened. She waited until their car left the driveway. Her hand struck my face so quickly that I did not understand what had happened until I tasted blood. One of her rings cut the skin beneath my eye. She stared at me afterward, breathing hard, and said I had humiliated her in her own home. The next morning, she woke me early and seated me at her vanity. Sunlight spilled across the jars of cream and perfume bottles. Her touch was gentle as she swept my hair away from my face. She opened a slim green tube and explained that green neutralized red. She blended it over the mark, added foundation, and dusted powder across my cheek. "There," she said, turning my face toward the mirror. No one needs to know everything that happens inside a family. I remember feeling grateful. That is the hardest part to admit. I mistook her patience for love because I had never been taught the difference between being cared for and being concealed. 3 years later, an argument ended with me hitting the edge of the staircase. I needed 5 stitches. At Bellwether General, my mother told the receptionist that I had always been clumsy. The nurse treating me was an older woman named Pauline. She pulled the curtain closed, sat beside me, and asked, "Mara, is the person who hurt you waiting outside?" Through a narrow gap, I saw my mother watching us. I said I had slipped. Pauline did not believe me, but she did not force me. She gave me a card with a number written on the back and slipped it inside my shoe so my mother would not find it. I kept that card for years. 6 weeks later, while my parents attended a church dinner, I packed 2 bags and moved into a rented room above a bakery. I worked by day, studied at night, earned my nursing degree, and eventually returned to Bellwether General wearing scrubs and an employee badge. I thought distance had made me free. What it had really done was make the cage larger and less visible. My father died when I was 26. After that, my mother and I met only in restaurants. I drove myself and kept conversations harmless. She blamed the hospital for my absence, and I allowed the story because it protected me from questions. By 30, I was supervising night shifts in the same emergency department where Pauline had once treated me. I owned a modest apartment, had nearly $25,000 saved, and slept peacefully behind a door that locked from the inside. Then I met Colin Ashford. Colin worked in commercial lending at his father's bank. We met at a hospital fundraiser when we both bid on the same weekend cabin rental. He had an easy smile, immaculate shirts, and a voice that never seemed to rise. After a childhood spent anticipating explosions, his calm felt like safety. For the first year, he seemed dependable. He arrived on time, remembered details, and fixed things without being asked. My best friend, Tessa, called him steady enough to set a clock by. There were warning signs. Colin touched my wrist when I spoke too long about work. He introduced me simply as a nurse, because charge nurse sounded self-important. When I disagreed publicly, he later explained why I had embarrassed him. I noticed. I simply interpreted his control as refinement because it wore a better suit than my mother's. He proposed at his family's lake house with his grandmother's ring. When I said yes, he kissed my hand and told me he wanted a wedding that brought both families together. That was how my mother returned. At the engagement dinner, Evelyn charmed the Ashfords with homemade cake, scripture, and perfect concern for every relative. By dessert, Colin's mother was calling her extraordinary. On the drive home, Colin said, "I understand you two have history, but she adores you." I replied, "She is very good when people are watching." He smiled as though I had made a clever joke. Within weeks, my mother controlled nearly every wedding decision. Through a church connection, she secured Hawthorne Mill, an expensive converted textile building, at a reduced rate. She announced it before both families, leaving me no graceful way to refuse. The discount became a leash disguised as a gift. She replaced my flowers, changed the menu, added a scripture reading, and invited people I barely knew. Each takeover arrived wrapped in sweetness. Whenever I objected, everyone saw only a loving mother helping an overwhelmed bride. During the guest list meeting, I wrote Lydia's name near the top of my page. My mother drew a line through it. "Not while I'm alive." I looked at Colin, hoping he would ask why. He studied the seating chart and said, "It's one person, Mara. Don't turn it into a war." I let the name remain crossed out. On the drive home, relief washed over me because the confrontation had been avoided. That relief frightened me more than anger would have. I had become a child on Alder Street again, grateful that the storm had moved towards somebody else. By May, I had invested more than $18,000 in the wedding. Colin and I had also signed for a gray house with a maple tree. My savings covered the earnest money, and closing was scheduled 2 weeks after the ceremony. Every choice made leaving more expensive. 6 weeks before the wedding, my mother gave me a bridal emergency kit in front of Colin's mother. Between the pins and stain remover lay a new green corrector stick. She watched me find it. "Remember," she said lightly, "green hides red." The other women heard makeup advice. I heard a threat spoken in a private language. That night, I sat on my apartment floor with the kit beside me and called the therapist I had stopped seeing during wedding planning. Dr. Samira Hale had spent more than a year urging me to record everything. "You don't have to confront anyone," she had said. "Just stop forcing your body to hold the only copy." I opened my laptop and created a folder. I scanned old photographs, requested the emergency room record, and listed dates, injuries, and possible witnesses. Clinical language kept my hands from shaking. The folder icon was blue. 2 nights later, I tried to tell Colin the truth. I said my mother had struck me more than once, that the injury requiring stitches had not been an accident, and that her wedding involvement was making me feel unsafe. He listened with the polite expression he used during loan meetings, then he patted my knee. "Families are messy," he said. "She's trying now. Keep things smooth until the wedding, and afterward we'll have our own life." I had handed him a small, carefully wrapped piece of my pain, and he returned it unopened. Still, I stayed. I told myself he had not understood because I had not explained clearly enough. It was the same bargain I had always made. If someone failed me, I searched first for the flaw in my delivery. 11 days before the wedding, a woman came into my emergency room with a broken wrist. Her husband answered every question, called her clumsy, and laughed when she struggled to explain her fall. I found a reason to send him outside, closed the curtain, and asked her whether she felt safe going home. Her eyes filled. She told me the truth in pieces. I documented her older bruises, notified our social worker, and gave her options without demanding a decision. As I turned to leave, she caught my hand. "You're kind," she whispered. "Your mother must be proud." I locked myself in the supply room and cried between shelves of gauze. That night, I added the sentence I had avoided for 16 years. At age 16, patient's mother struck her beneath the left eye, then instructed her in concealing the injury. Once written, it could no longer be dismissed as an exaggerated memory. 3 days later, Lydia called. She did not complain about being excluded. She asked about my work, my dress, and whether I was sleeping. Then she said, "I only need you to consider one question. Are you marrying someone in whose presence you can tell the whole truth?" I stared through my apartment window and could not answer. Lydia let the silence remain. "If the answer ever frightens you," she said, "call me. Any hour." 5 days before the ceremony, she sent an old photograph of my 17-year-old mother standing beside my grandmother outside St. Matthew's. One of Evelyn's eyes was swollen. Both women smiled. The message beneath it read, "Your grandmother hit her after supper." The following morning, she taught Evelyn how to cover it. "Your mother promised me the pattern would end with her." Another message followed. "When you were 11, I called child services. Your mother served the investigator coffee and you said you were fine. Afterward, Evelyn removed me from the family and called me unstable. For 21 years, Lydia had been punished not for causing trouble but for naming it." I added the photograph and messages to the blue folder. At the rehearsal dinner, my mother gave a flawless toast about loyalty, describing family as the shelter God gives us. Guests lifted their glasses, then a delivery driver brought flowers from Lydia. The card read, "For the woman who is finally ready to trust herself." My mother's smile vanished for half a second. Minutes later, she cornered me near the coatroom, gripping my elbow and demanding to know what Lydia had told me. Colin appeared and saw her holding me. "Whatever this is," he said, "can we save it until after the wedding?" Then he returned to the table. That should have been when I left. Instead, I followed her schedule and spent my final unmarried night on Alder Street so the photographer could capture beautiful getting-ready memories. At 10:40 p.m., my mother made tea and outlined my future. I should leave night shift, host bank clients, and give Colin children quickly. She spoke as though my life were already hers. Finally, she said 2 church women would supervise the bridal preparations. My hair would cover my shoulders, and the makeup artist would make me presentable. "No," I said. It was a quiet word, but the kitchen changed around it. I told her the women were not invited. I would choose my appearance. She was attending as a guest, not directing the wedding. Her face emptied. "After everything I've done for you, you mean everything you've taken over?" The old silence settled between us, but this time I did not rush to repair it. "You hit me when I was 16, I said. "Then you taught me to hide it. I have spent half my life covering what you do, and I'm finished." Her hand moved before I saw her shoulder turn. The ring struck the bone beneath my left eye. Light flashed across my vision. The sound was barely louder than a clap in another room. She looked at the mark forming on my face and said, "Look what you made me do." For the first time, I did not apologize. I drove home and treated myself like a patient. Ice, ibuprofen, photographs from 3 angles, measurements, and written notes. At midnight, I asked Dr. Hale for a letter confirming my treatment history. Her answer arrived minutes later. "Yes, tell me when you are ready." Then I called Lydia. "I could disappear tomorrow," I said. "I could send one message and never enter that building." "You could," she replied, "but disappearing is what their secrecy has always required. If you can bear it, tell the truth in the room they built for the lie." At 6, I printed the photographs, medical record, messages, timeline, and Dr. Hale's letter. I placed them inside a rigid blue envelope and drove to Hawthorne Mill. In the bridal suite, the makeup artist studied my face and lifted a green corrector wand. "I can cover most of this," she said gently. I looked at that familiar color and felt something inside me become still. "No," I said. "Not today." Tessa arrived at 8:30, looked at my eye, and asked, "What are we doing?" I explained, and she listened without interrupting. Tell me where you need me." My mother entered in champagne lace. Seeing my uncovered face, she did not ask whether I was hurt. "Where is the makeup artist?" she demanded. "The guests cannot see you like this." Before I answered, Colin knocked and called through the door. My mother opened it herself. "Come talk sense into her," she said. Colin stepped inside. His eyes found the bruise, and genuine shock crossed his face. For 1 second, hope rose in me. I said, "Ask me one question." He looked from me to my mother. The question was obvious. Who did this? My mother sighed that we had argued, and I had become hysterical. Colin adjusted his cuff and chose the version that required nothing from him. "We can deal with the family drama later," he said. "Just cover it for the photographs." My mother laughed with relief. The church women waiting outside joined her. Even Colin gave a small chuckle, as if he had repaired the morning with common sense. That laugh ended my hesitation. I saw the life waiting if I stayed. The gray house, polite dinners, children taught to distrust their fear, and a husband who called every wound inconvenient. I picked up the blue envelope. Still wearing my bridal robe, I walked out of the suite and descended the main staircase. The quartet faltered as guests turned toward me. Conversation stopped 1 row at a time. I walked down the aisle and stood beneath the arch meant for our vows. "Thank you for coming," I said. "There will be no wedding today." My mother appeared at the back of the room. Colin stood several steps behind her. "Last night, my mother struck me in her kitchen. This morning, the man I was supposed to marry saw the result and told me to hide it for the photographs." I turned my face so the windows illuminated the bruise. No one laughed now. I placed the green corrector stick on the white-covered gift table. "When I was 16, my mother taught me that green cancels red. It doesn't. It only makes violence easier for other people to ignore." My mother pressed a hand to her chest and cried, "You are destroying this family." I looked at her across the room that she had filled with witnesses. "No, I'm done being the thing that holds it together." I handed the blue envelope to Colin's father. "These are copies. My attorney will receive the originals." Then I walked back down the aisle. An elderly woman near the 4th row squeezed my fingers. Outside, Tessa waited with the car, and Lydia stood beside it after driving from Harrisburg before dawn. "Someone needed to show up as your family," she said. As we left, Colin stood on the steps facing the guests with both palms raised, trying to manage the room. My phone vibrated continuously until I turned it off. The following Monday, a judge granted me a protection order. I did not pursue criminal charges. I needed distance, not revenge. The house purchase collapsed. I lost the earnest money and every dollar already spent on the wedding, just over $19,000 in total. Colin later bought the house alone. Leaving was expensive. Staying would have cost more. Bellwether divided into versions of the story. Some church members called me cruel. My mother continued arranging altar flowers and telling anyone who listened that Lydia had poisoned me. But letters began arriving at the hospital. "You don't know me," one said. But I was at Hawthorne Mill. "My father made us hide things too," another wrote. "I thought silence meant loyalty. Now I understand it meant fear." 6 months later, the hospital asked me to teach nurses how to document abuse. I told them a polished home proves nothing. Frightened people may protect the person hurting them, and an open question can remain for years. I told them about a 19-year-old who lied about falling downstairs. I did not use my name. I did tell them that Nurse Pauline's question had eventually helped save her. Even though the answer came 13 years late, Lydia visits twice a month now. Tessa comes whenever her shifts allow. We eat around my small table, interrupt one another, laugh too loudly, and leave dishes in the sink until morning. No one monitors anyone else's jaw. No one mistakes tension for love. I still see Dr. Hale on Tuesdays. Healing, it is slow, repetitive work. One memory examined, one boundary kept, one honest sentence at a time. I never recovered the green corrector stick from the gift table. I hope someone threw it away. Sometimes I think about the wedding photographs we never took. The flowers, the arch, the expensive dress hanging upstairs. For years, I believed losing those things would mean I had failed. Now I understand that the most important picture from that day was the one no camera captured. A woman walking down the aisle in the wrong direction, with nothing covering her face. My mother taught me that a good family protects its secrets. Lydia taught me that real family protects its people. And here is what I finally learned for myself. Peace purchased with your voice is not peace. It is silence with a beautiful tablecloth over it. If someone has taught you to conceal what they did, you are allowed to tell the truth. You are allowed to leave the room. You are allowed to disappoint every person who benefited from your quiet. The wedding cost me $19,000, a house with a maple tree, and the future I thought I had chosen. Walking away gave me back the one thing none of them had ever planned to let me keep: myself.